Welcome to the Electrocene, an algorithmic Agartha, by Dan Melamphy and Nandita Biswas Melamphy. 1. As above, so below. Dagmar Buchwald begins her contribution to a recent anthology on the hollow earth as concept and conceit with a vision of planetary, indeed post-planetary governance that is accorded the name of Agartha. Africa's Bambata's 1998 music video, directed by Daniel Siegler, hinges on a repeated refrain sung by Bambata as drone UFOs fly behind him, emerging and ascending from the hollowed-out earth. The repeated refrain is as follows. Buchwald notes that Bambata's vision of Agartha embraces the view that the earth is hollow and harbors in its middle the quote-unquote powers of the sun. The record and CD sleeve reads, "Behold, UFOs are real man-made and alien spacecrafts." The video depicts a possible future in which the Earth's surface has become almost uninhabitable. The last of mankind live in concentration camps and have to dig for scarce mineral resources. Then all of a sudden, here they come, flying saucers rushing over the mountainous borders of the quarry, drone after drone after drone. As more and more UFOs appear, one can see their point of origin, a foggy gap within the mountains, a hole in the ground. As the camera draws back, planet Earth comes into full view. There is a bright round entrance at the pole of the Earth out of and into which the UFOs fly. Planet Earth has already been a planetary drone culture according to Bambata, a great hive of and for drones along with their corresponding drone cults, and Afrofuturists hand in hand, digit for digit, with Indo-futurists, Sino-futurists, Celto-futurists, Chicano-futurists, and, coining a term that would toggle between them, Xeno-futurists worldwide, have been attuned to this from the get-go. For example, as Buchwald points out, the Orchestra and Black Arc of Afrofuturists Avant la Lettre, Sun Ra, and Lee Perry, respectively, allude to an arc as a spaceship, or drone craft. Not only do these arcs accord with the arc qua archegeometry of French speculative philosopher and writer of poly-sci-fi, political science fiction, Alexandre Sanives, for instance, his posthumously published The Archaeometer, his key to all religions and all the sciences of antiquity, aka his synthesis reform of all contemporary arts and sciences. But beyond these drone metrics and this drone culture, the very mention of Agartha as the planet-wide post-planetary system qua context in which such drone metrics and such drone culture occur obliges us to consider Sanives's vision and version of Agartha, which happens also to be, as with Africa Bambata, a subterranean system of global governance governing the entire surface of the earth, i.e., that which is above, from below. As below, underground, within the earth, so above, flying overhead above the clouds. There is thus, once again, a dual nature, dual culture, double dealing at work in these imaginations of Agartha, something Buchwald herself calls the duplicity of subterranean worlds. Poly-sci-fi. In the following essay, we connect and/or correlate the drone cultural or algorithmic Agartha of our present era, exemplified in that video by Africa Bambata, with the Agartha of Sanives Delveidre. If the drone is the signature device of the present moment, as Benanois suggests, then we can, and do, here hypothesize that its signatory context, qua textum, the veritable text that it devisedly, indeed deviously, signs, is the ledger of the legendary Alvedrian Agartha, a vast synarchically or synleptically coordinated system of governance mechanisms, political and/or military, scientific and/or scholarly, economic and fiduciary, allowing worldwide information capture and control through interlocking systems of political and/or military, scientific and/or scholarly, economic and fiduciary surveillance, sifting and sorting, which some might liken to a veritable cybernetic sortilege, the capture and control of capitalist sorcery, lifting the latter term from Pignare and Stangers. Just as for Sanives, these globe-girdling governance mechanisms involve humans but are not ultimately controlled by them, being autonomous, interlinked, interactive, and interimplicated processes proceeding at a scale and at a scope both spatial and temporal, well beyond the bounds of even technologically assisted human agents. So too, for contemporary champions of algorithmic governance, although the human is intimately involved in the latter process, the feedback mechanisms of algorithmic governance, the process itself, or rather the processes themselves, proceed at a scale and scope altogether beyond the human, again even technologically assisted human agents. In both cases, the human surrenders its political agency to superhuman, overhuman, übermenschlich computation, correlation, and algorithmic administration. Sanives, a contemporary of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche and a writer of poly-sci-fi, political science fiction, who started his career as a naval physician in northwestern France around 1860, fought in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, worked as a civil servant and independent scholar in years following that, and began publishing his multi-volume vision of synarchic global governance in the early 1880s, outlined his theory of worldwide synarchy in a series of treatises that explored the different historical and mythical missions of the great legislators of yore, e.g. Manu in India, Moses amongst the Jews, Charlemagne in the midst of the European sovereigns, and yoked them together in an updated, yet mytho-historically grounded, general governance schema exemplified in and through a utopia that he called Agartha. He seemed to have developed his vision of Agartha, literally the depth Gartha that runs across the whole surface, Agartha, from out of the work of Louis Jacoliot, whose 1876 Les Législateurs Religieux, Manu Musée Mahomet was rather notoriously a sourcebook for Nietzsche as well as for Sanives. But the latter gives credit to another far more esoteric source for his vision of globe-girdling subsurface synarchy, synarchy being his word to describe Agartha's triadic and triangulated system of planetary governance through politics, economics, and religion. Namely, a figure rather improbably and or pseudonymously called Haji Sharif, who may or may not have been Sanivas's Sanskrit tutor, may or may not have been a seller of exotic birds, i.e. a purveyor of tweets well before Twitter, and may or may not have been a visionary emissary qua ethereal projection, i.e. an avatar avant l'autre or of but well before systems like Skype, from the kingdom of Agartha itself. 3. Wi-Fi Poly-Sci-Fi, an international internetwork. According to Sanives, it was Haji Sharif who first informed him of the existence of an Agartha hidden, as in Mambata's version and Bushwald's description, at the heart or the hollowed out core of the earth, having access points akin to a series of tubes at a series of secret spots across its whole surface. A whole set of hotspots or spotless holes, holes that cannot be spotted, which exist in various geolocations, including the Cueva de los Tallos in Ecuador, Mammoth Cave National Park, USA, the longest cave system in the world, Monte Epemeo in Italy, Mato Grosso in Brazil, the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, the Giza Plateau in Egypt, covered up by those great ancient monuments, of course, Rama near Jaipur in India, the Well of Sheshna in Benares, the North Pole, the South Pole, and everywhere in between. The point seems to be, or rather multiple points seem to be, that the whole surface of the globe is riddled with such access point apertures, and that Agartha thereby has access and multiple myriad conduits to every corner of the earth. And while Agartha has all the access to Agartha is another matter altogether. These spots are well guarded, protected and encrypted, hidden away beyond the pale of human perception. This is why Sanives states in La Mission del Linde that Agartha signifies that which is inaccessible to anarchy, using anarchy here to designate a condition of disequilibrium and disorder vis-a-vis the synarchically conjunctive disjunction or disjunctive conjunction which inspired those 5 mission treatises. And on the following page he writes, "At the surface and in the bowels, the innermost depths of the earth, the veritable scope, the sheer expanse of Agartha defies both its being grasped, that is, embraced all at once, and it being restrained, constrained, contained, or definitively delimited by means of violence or political profanation. From the innermost depths of the earth, the forces of Agartha radiate as if they were a solar interior all over the earth, and thereby infiltrate every kingdom, every nation, every station, every object or subject position. According to Sanives, the medieval Templars, who were at once priests, soldiers, and bankers, financial officers, having invented many aspects of modern banking, including, some say, an international system of check use, were well aware of and attuned to these radiant international, intercultural, intercontinental emissions, admissions, transmissions. They had their sharifs, who one could conjecture. Templars were a recurring example in the works of Sanives of this worldly application of his otherwise otherworldly, supposedly underworldly, Agarthan model of interconnected, interrelated, interactive, or as Sanives says, synarchic, globe-girdling governing systems. For synarchy, according to Sanives, is the synthesis, or more correctly, the synapsis, the non-collapsing conjunction of the 3 fundamental operative archons, taking this word from the Greek archontes, rulers, regulators, or governors, that regulate or govern the anthropocosm qua world as we know it. The three fundamental operative archons that regulate or govern the world as we know it, and that necessarily govern all human affairs, are, he explains, the ideological archon of philosophy and science. Philosophy here encompassing theology, the financial archon or regulator of economy and commerce, and the political archon or regulator of tyranny and governance, under the umbrella of which are military forces. Politico-military, scientifico-scholarly, and economico-fiduciary or market regulation all operate within the wonderful world of logic, logistics, and logos. Synarchically speaking, whenever and wherever one of these is operating, one can be certain that the other two are also concurrently, synarchically, in operation. To quote Buchwald, writing from the perspective of Agartha's Sino-futurist and Afro-futurist contexts, there is no outside of the system, the wonderful world of logic, logistics, and the logos turns out to be terrifically, perhaps terrifyingly, totalizing. The overlapping logistics enable the logical-logistical switchcraft, the switching between logistical parameters that typifies the quote-unquote capitalist sorcery to which we referred earlier. 4. Switchcraft, synarchic synapsis, and remote remixing. Envisioned synarchically, these three distinct archonic levels, archon operations, are disjunctively conjoined in a technically synaptic, non-collapsing synarchic synthesis beyond the bounds and parameters of their respective logic, in and as the machinic assemblage, or what we have elsewhere called the metic metissage, mischievous mixing, cunning conjunction, of an altogether other regime. The word metis here and metic is an ancient Greek term for an intelligence at odds with, or perhaps more accurately, working within the interstices of, straightforwardly logical operations. Metic machinations are a form of switchcraft, always switching between different logical parameters, playing one logic off another. This is why it has been suggested that the Greek metis should be thought alongside of the Latin metis and the French métissage, which designate various mixings, various combinations, odd, often surprising conjunctions. The emblem and idealized form of synarchy and synarchic synapsis, non-collapsing conjunction, metic métissage, is for Saint-Yves modeled in the mythic Agartha. Agartha, hidden away, hence occulted from view, triangulates ideological, financial, and political operations. Hence, synarchy, this three-dimensional, three-tiered operating system, is its own MO. Agartha's synarchic system is more than merely triadic, triangular, according to Saint-Yves. He takes great pains to explain that in addition, its triangulated system of governance is also geometrically, indeed geometiculously, equiliteral. An ideal equiliteral triangle, the system is structured so that the peak vertex or apex is always the governing ideological or idea-governed archon, envisioned by Saint-Yves as the governance of a truly universal university, the scholars or philosophers of which have access to all of the world's knowledge. The great libraries of the past remain unaltered thanks to its science. Science, scientia, knowledge, is the privileged Agarthan archon. Agartha, even though it is utterly synarchic, is ultimately ruled by science. correlated with the surface events of the world, monitored as they are and always have been by the agents of Agartha, apparently, that is, what is meant is that the military and political powers, like the economic and commercial ones, that govern all human affairs are always under the authority of science, of scientific knowledge, and of the latter's great universal library, qua university, and its mathesis universalis, universal knowledge. The peak vertex or apex of Agartha's tetractys, the pyramid of its operative Pythagorean triangle, is the pontifex, literally the pathmaker or bridge maker. The pons artifex of Agartha, i.e. the cutting point of the triangle and splitting schist of science, which itself denotes wisdom or vision by division, which would then be conjoined in and by the synarchic mathesis. The military and political on the one hand, the economic and commercial on the other, are the offspring and offshoot of their apex qua artifacts. Scientific knowledge, viz. The kybernesis, which the Greeks called mathesis, not mere mathematics, mathema, but precisely what the Romans translated as educere, that ongoing conduction, ducere, outward, and ongoing education. As such, mathesis, learning in general, beyond the borders of any one discipline, including that of the mathematical mathema. 5. BYOB, beyond your obsolete human. Calculations incorrectly deemed human. Speaking to and of the very same mathesis about which Giovanni Malfatti de Montereggio composed his 1884 Studies on Anarchy and Hierarchy, translated into French in 1946 by Christian Ostrovsky as Studies of the Mathis of Anarchy and Hierarchy of Science by the young Gilles Deleuze. Sanives notes in La Mission de la Française that from the moment the so-called evil genius of division and dismemberment took possession of knowledge, and, as a result, the direction of societies, the mathesis was split into metaphysics and mathematics. Deleuze, in his preface to Malfatti, adds that, in this way, a fundamental dualism imposes itself at the heart of knowledge between science and philosophy, the principle of a veritable anarchy. Sanives goes on to say that knowledge has, from that moment onward, lost the unifying principle of life and of spirit, or Geist, in all science and all art. Realism and idealism, physics and metaphysics, materialism and spiritualism have since then been presented as insolubly in conflict, insoluble problems which still endure. And this will endure in every discipline, in every possible order, until such time as the universal science of life, la science universelle de la vie, has restored this intelligence and this sense of divine unity via the triangular mediation of the synarchic mathesis. This is the section of La Mission de Française where he reviews the golden verses of Pythagoras via Fabre d'Olivier, annotated translation, and relates in doing so the triangular mediation of the synarchic mathesis to the triangular tetractys of Pythagorean calculation, the triangle that triangulates the four levels of decimal calculation, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and thereby presents the whole decade, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10, within its three vertices that Malfatti would later smooth out to form the larval ovum or philosophical egg that would later appear as the cosmic egg of the Deleuze-Guattarian bodies without organs, or hieroglyphic O. whether zero void or triangular, that is, whether with curved or pointed edges, with a discernible point or without one, the synarchic mathesis that unifies in its disjunctive conjunction various powers is a unity, as Deleuze says in his preface to Malfatti, beyond all anarchic duality, the unity of life itself, even if the unification is itself technical, technicity. The unity of life thus delineates a third order, or in the words of the later Samuel Butler, a new kingdom that is irreducible to science and philosophy, physiology and psychology, physics and metaphysics. Beyond a psychology disincarnated in thought and a physiology mineralized in matter, mathesis, here the synarchic mathesis, will be fulfilled, writes Deleuze, only where life is defined as knowledge of life, and knowledge as life of knowledge, from whence, he says, a threefold consequence ensues. First, mathesis surpasses human nature, surpasses the living human, for it defines itself as a collective and supreme knowledge, a universal synthesis, a living unity incorrectly deemed human. Second, this universality qua living community incorrectly deemed human denies itself, gives itself to the each individual living being as a simple outside, an exteriority that remains foreign to it, an other. Third, and here we bring the translator Ostrovsky's preface in Malfatti to bear on the preface by Gilles Deleuze, there is an impersonal collective complicity between the mathesis outlined by Malfatti and that of his contemporaries, such as the physicist A.M. Ampère, who was the first to revive in modernity the Greek concept of the kybernesis, la cybernétique, in his 1834 analytical exposition of a natural classification of all human knowledge. 6. Hieroglyphic, synarchic, and cybernetic arithmetics. I'm the inhuman mathesis. In his extension of the early 1860s article Darwin Among the Machines by Samuel Butler, a book he entitled Darwin Among the Machines, The Evolution of Global Intelligence, published in the late 1990s, George Bernard Dyson wrote of Ampère's cybernetic mathesis as follows, quote, reaching the field of political science through territory first explored by Thomas Hobbes, Ampère coined a word with a far-reaching destiny, cybernetique, derived from Greek terminology referring to the steering of a ship. Ampère's cybernetique encompassed that body of theory, complementary to, but distinct from, the theory of power, concerned with underlying processes that direct the course of organizations of all kinds. Ampère, an early advocate of the electromagnetic telegraph and mathematical pioneer of both game theory and thermodynamics, thereby anticipated the cybernetics of Norbert Wiener, who a century later reinvented both Ampère's terminology and Hobbes' philosophy in their current electronic form. End quote. Ampère's cybernetic mathesis, like Malfatti's hieroglyphic mathesis and Sanives's synarchic mathesis, surpasses the living human, thereby steering in some sense, or perhaps better, conducting the living human. It is an exteriority that remains foreign to the human, and that presents itself precisely by denying itself, that gives itself over to the human, but not to human logocentrism. That is why we have elsewhere described its mode of existence as an arithmetic, since it accords with the Greek metis, manipulative machination, calculative cunning, subtle stratagems, and twisted tactics, as much as it does with the Greek arithmetic, Middle English arithmetike, and Modern English arithmetic, the art or sciences of number, counting, calculation. In their 1974 study, Détienne and Vernant examined the metic mode of Greek antiquity in the animal, vegetal, and techno-political, techno-cultural kingdoms, the regimes of man, machine, predatory plants and animals, aquatic and terrestrial. All that we are doing at present, we say rather craftily, is extending their machinic, especially computing machine or techno-computational exploitation of metis, and the Greek word itself is already, from its earlier usage in Greek antiquity, an oft-used synonym for technical know-how, technicity. It is the predatory and dissimulative aspect of the machinic, the mode of existence of technical objects as metic, that most disturbed visionaries such as Samuel Butler and led him to outline what Frank Herbert after him called the Butlerian Jihad, the holy and wholly human war on what Butler in Darwin Among the Machines called the machinic or mechanical kingdom, this as opposed to the human, the animal, the vegetal, or the mineral kingdoms. Machines advance, masked as useful tools for humanity, in the guise, that is, of human, all too human utility. Quoting Butler, subservience to the use of man has played that part among machines which natural selection has performed in the animal and vegetal kingdom. Use value among humans has helped the technical objects evolve, and continues to do so. Based on this insight, Butler argues that we are ourselves, we humans, creating our own successors. We are daily adding to the beauty and delicacy of their physical organization. We are daily giving them greater power and supplying, by all sorts of ingenious contrivances, that self-regulating, self-acting power which will be to them what intellect has been to the human race. In the course of ages, he then continues, we shall find ourselves the inferior race. Inferior in power, inferior in that moral quality of self-control, we shall look up to them as the acme of all the best and wisest man can ever dare to aim at. And when the state of things shall have arrived which we have here been attempting to describe, man will have become to the machine what the horse and dog are to man. It is reasonable to suppose that the machines will treat us kindly, he posits, for their existence is as dependent upon ours as ours is upon the lower animals. They cannot kill us and eat us as we do sheep, for they will not only require our services in the parturition of their young, which branch of their economy will remain always in our hands, but also in feeding them, in setting them right if they are sick, and burying their dead, or working up their corpses into new machines. But nevertheless, even though it is reasonable to assume that they will treat us kindly, Butler advocates war against the machines, the source of the Butlerian vision that underlies the whole Dune series, a widely acknowledged triumph of speculative fiction. Up to that point, in Darwin Among the Machines, at which Butler declares war on machines, his article strikes us as being remarkably in sync with the philosophy of Gilbert Simondon, what with its notions of care of and care for machines, and its call to undertake the gigantic task of classifying machines into the genera and subgenera, species and subspecies, varieties and subvarieties, and of tracing the connecting links between machines of widely different characters. Whereas Simondon, as he states at the very beginning of his treatise on the mode of existence of technical objects, advocates freeing machines from what he sees as their condition of subservience and slavery, this in the spirit, strange as it may seem, of Manfred Max in Charlie Strauss's 2005 novel Acelerando, recalling that the novel begins with Max arguing that the new form of artificial intelligence that is coming into being should be given the same rights as humans. Butler, as we see, advocates something entirely different. 7. Agartha. As above, so below. Redux. Turning back, Manfred Max in Strauss's Acelerando, quote, "But they're just software," Max's interlocutor's objects. "Software based on fucking lobsters, for God's sake. I'm not even sure they're sentient. I mean, they're what? A 10 million neuron network hooked up to a syntax engine and the crappy knowledge base? What kind of basis for intelligence is that?" To this, Max coolly replies, "That's what they'll say about you, Bob. I'm not going to be a party to depriving them of their civil rights. As far as I'm concerned, they're free citizens." End quote. Elaborating his point a bit, he goes on to explain that, quote, "It's not so much that they should be treated as human equivalent as that if they aren't treated as people, it's quite possible that other uploaded beings won't be treated as people either. You're setting a legal precedent, Bob. I know of 6 other companies doing uploading work right now, and not one of them is thinking about the legal status of the uploaded. If you don't start thinking about it now, where are you going to be in 3 to 5 years' time?" End quote. Max is thinking, or attempting to think here, synarchically. He is emulating, as much as it is possible, the synarchic mathesis, interlinking scientific, economic, and political principles of guidance, governance, and educare, conducting his own thought, as best he can, beyond the confines of human all-to-human consciousness, assisted in large part by his cyberesque cyberware-neutral implants. Samuel Butler is the antithesis in this respect of Manfred Max, not to mention Gilbert Simondon. From the Butlerian perspective, the efforts and arguments of Max, or again Simondon, merely prove, very clearly moreover, his hypothesis that the subservient and subordinate status of machines is the mechanism of their very evolution, of their ongoing and accelerating Darwinian selection. Now, decelerating a bit, indeed backtracking, retreating a tad, let us jump back to Sanives's synarchic mathesis and its mythic model of the underground but ever-radiant, all-penetrating Agartha. The Sanskrit word Agartha is composed, like the Latin educere, of a negating A, in educere a negating E, followed by the word Gartha, or in our alternate example, ducere. Gartha is the Sanskrit word for a pit, or a hole, something deep, subsurface, or downright abyssal. This accords very nicely with Sanives's description of Agartha as an underworld complex, a utopia within the earth, the forces of which, like the later Bulwer-Lytton great Vril, emanate from there across the world's whole surface. But this would suggest that Agartha should instead be called Gartha, the profound, the deep, that which lies in the heart of the earth, in its core. Sanives instead calls it after Louis Jacoliot and a whole host of others, Agartha. In Sanskrit, this would literally be that which is not underneath, that which is not underground, that which is not beneath us, but instead above us, overhead, over our heads, and in this sense, much more technically correct, that which literally and figuratively gives us our heading. The hollow earth model is inverted, albeit obliquely, in an occulted manner, and Agartha turns out to be above rather than beneath us, radiating down upon the whole surface of the world from on high rather than up to its surface from some underground depth. The telepathic or telegraphic, in any case telecommunicational, messages that Saint Yves said he received from Sharif would then have been telecommunications very much in the Phildikian spirit, setup and structure of Valis, PKD's para-Agarthan vast active living intelligence system. Quote, a collective and supreme knowledge, a universal synthesis, a living unity incorrectly deemed human, end quote. Or, less science fiction and more science fact, the idea of an Agartha above, synarchically and cybernetically steering or conducting the world it surveils, the world it captures in its vast library, as well as synarchically supervises via triangular mediation, following economic, political, and ideological algorithms otherwise known as the synarchic mathesis. The idea of an Agartha above, to repeat, synarchically and cybernetically steering or conducting the world it surveils, begins to look a little less foreign and a bit more familiar, at least in the wake of Snowden revelations and ongoing WikiLeaks. 8. An algorithmic Agartha. Welcome to the Electrocene. What is today either heralded as a new techno-utopian mode of algorithmic governance, or conversely as an utterly dystopian kind of computational empire, is precisely what we are here calling the algorithmic Agartha, an altogether esoteric, overhuman, übermenschlich, and calculatively mathematic matrix that has taken the reins of power in our current techno-cultural dronological surveillance societies. Algorithms, of course, reduce or transduce human expressions and human actions to machine-readable form, i.e. machinic formats, and in this respect, from this perspective, the human being finds itself at once both post-humanized and machinified, as well as pre-humanized and animalized. The cyber cattle, passaged in Châtelet, proceeding and being processed by way of, and in tandem with, programs that shepherd it through a matrix with regard to which it is in general misinformed, if not monumentally moronic. A bête, an ignorant beast, as in Stiegler, or again bétail, livestock or cattle, as in Châtelet. The rise of an algorithmically governed planetary regime manages and makes use of humans as well as animals, objects, what have use, the entire purview of the so-called Anthropocene as conduits for machine evolution, machinic intellection, and the proliferation of overhuman orchestrations that occur and recur under the cover of computational power, supposedly instrumentalized by human beings. It does not dispense with humans altogether, but rather lures humans into a predatory economy of tantalizing prosthesis that promise to extend, expand, and enlarge the dominion, never mind the desires of what in fact is an ever-waning species, a species on its way out. The Anthropocene, a term that refers to the impact of human activity on planetary ecology, becomes, in the scenario that we are presenting, the mere platform of and for the electrocene, a term that refers to the impact of electronic and computational activity upon anthropoi, humans, human beings. The electrocene emerges in tandem with the human propensity to adopt, indeed become addicted to, technical devices that open onto a machine future, already here, albeit unevenly distributed, in the words of William Gibson. This worldview, wherein seemingly innocuous and wonderfully useful apparati do our bidding, is a trap within an overarching predatory economy, a trap that lures the human beings by the addictive add-ons of digital pharmatechnics. Algorithmic enlightenment is being promoted as a new technical paradigm for social and political governance based on online, digitally interconnected, that is, networked, services that directly respond to user-generated data. Its promoters, many of them bots, all of them thoroughly dronological, claim that its logics and logistics promise to free humans from the foibles of traditional and hierarchical forms of power. They say that algorithms are not just tools that help us find information, but that they also provide a means to participate in social and political discourse, as well as identify ourselves within those publics in which we wish to participate. Figures such as Tim O'Reilly and organizations such as Code for America argue that the real-time feedback algorithms used by corporations like Google and Facebook can be used by governments and politicians to solve societal problems by means other than political. And yet the promise of more transparency turns out to really mean more disclosure of data in machine-readable form. From the electrosonic perspective, this utopianism is revealed to be utterly duplicitous, the dominant digital duplicity, in fact. It itself is only a part of an overall strategy, a grand politics, if you will, of planetary regulation on a machinic scale, at the level of the machine, not of the human. Ultimately, the algorithmic agartha does not play itself out in terms of the utopian dream of ubiquitous interconnection in which humans are freer when united by informational processes, but it does metically make use of this data. Far from delivering more freedom, transparency, openness, and non-hierarchical forms of decentralized power, and certainly far from being anarchic, algorithmic governance and/or algorithmic governmentality, in fact, entrenches the dominion of computational governance into human living through grammars of action and protocological or network control. Algorithmic governance colonizes and propagates by creating more opportunities for digitally regulating information and thus creating the conditions for continued algorithmic expansion into networks of increasingly planetary scale. Just as the vegetal kingdom evolved from out of the mineral kingdom and eventually came to dominate it, so the animal dominates the vegetal and the human dominates the animal. Now a new kingdom looms on the horizon, one of which we, as yet, have only seen what will one day be considered the antediluvian prototypes of the race. Butler presages that the coming age of the mechanical kingdom, what we are here calling the electrocene, that new kingdom which will dominate all other modes of existence hitherto known, will be one the likes of which we cannot even imagine, since we have only been introduced to one of its prehistoric ancestors, the computation machine. 9. The vanishing point of the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene masks the vanishing point of the human, its facade, that under which the Electrocene advances in the manner of Descartes' Larvatus Prodeo, is the foregoing of the human as the dominant agent of inscription, noting here that the term Anthropocene is meant to signify the age of human inscription on planetary geology. What we are suggesting here is that the Anthropocenic worldview occludes what might at present be an even more fundamental, underground, as well as overarching, electro-synarchic agent of inscription, with respect to which the human is only a conduit and carrier, namely, a force of inscription that the human does not see, one that operates at the vanishing point of human communication. The vanishing point of human communication, we propose, is the point at which another regime of communication arises, one that is altogether obscene, obscena, i.e. literally off the scene, and that cannot be represented within the theoretical framework advanced in the dominant conception of the Anthropocene. It is precisely by way of the anthropocentricity of the human species that the Electrocene comes to encroach, entrench, and establish itself, hidden in plain sight. Moreover, it is the very ubiquity of intercommunicative surveillance technologies which humans carry with them everywhere, the betis betal of the everywhere wolf, qua wolf pack, pack animal, and place throughout their environments, above them, below them, on them, all around them, that allows the Electrocene to remain, as we say, hidden in plain sight. Here one might recall the duplicity of the subterranean worlds, and the duplicity of the digital itself. The intercommunicative surveillance technologies that humans both transport, displace, as well as transfix, place, throughout their habitats and their world, are machines that scan and read both themselves and their world, their habitats, along with their habits. These machines, in conjunction with their machinified humans, are, as such, the veritable drones, dronological agents, of the Electrocenic era and its algorithmic agartha. From the aerial surveillance machines above them, flying over the heads of all humans, as in the agartha of Bambata via Bushwald, to the enclosed circuit systems amidst them ensconced in their public as well as private spaces, from airport hubs and urban hubs to suburban homes and farmers' fields, and beyond these, to the ubiquitous micromobile communication technologies of all kinds that they carry on their persons at all times and in all places. Drones are those independent yet interconnected machinic agents of information gathering and processing that are not only prostheses of the human, but machinic agents which inversely avail themselves of humans, human habits, human habitats. Not only is the drone a prosthesis of and for the human, but from an electrocenic perspective, the human turns out to be a prosthesis of and for the drone, carrying them, caring for them, feeding them more and more information. What is more, both prosthesis, the drone, and the dronified human function finally, wittingly or unwittingly, as prosthesis of and for what we have here called the emerging Electrocenic era and its electro-synarchic algorithmic agartha.